Since 1985, the bash in its entirety has raised $260 million.
Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, start your engines. What began as a wild idea from the mind of electronics genius Dick Smith, inspired by the chaos of the Redex trials in the 1950s, and somehow became one of Australia's most outrageous and meaningful charity events. A rally where the cars are insane, the drivers even crazier, and not having enough fun could actually get you penalised. A blend of Burning Man and Rotary Club on the inhospitable tracks of Burke and Wills, crisscrossing the outback, raising money for kids in need. Was it originally a joke or a stroke of genius? Why was cheating not only allowed but encouraged? How did you get pole position? Is the rally still alive today? To answer that is the man who was at the helm of Variety Club Bash through its most iconic years. John's career spans the front lines of Australian media, from GTV9 Melbourne to the ABC's Four Corners, to political reporting in Canberra and leading newsrooms at Channel 7 and SBS, before stepping into one of the most unconventional roles in Australian charity event history. John Flower, welcome to another world.
I don't know how to answer any of those questions, but I'll do my best. I'm only a £10 pom. I'm still learning about Australia.
For those who don't know, and I don't know, what is a £10 pom?
In the 50s and 60s, Australia needed people from anywhere in the world. And in England, there was a scheme whereby you only paid 10 English pounds to migrate to Australia with government sanctions, as it were. And so if you didn't stay for 2 years, you had to pay back whatever the real figure was. But this is it, £10 poms. And the ships were full of people like myself, usually young. Many families came out as £10 poms, and that was it. It cost you 10 quid, 10 English pounds, and if you stayed for the 2 years, that was it. You were in forever, and I'm very happy to say that.
The Empire was incentivising you to come down and cause mischief.
Well, my father...
In the colony.
The colony. My father always said that me leaving England and coming to Australia would have raised the IQ of both countries.
Love it, love it. So, John, how did you get started with being involved? Were you a competitor? Or?
No, I was on the board of the Variety Club in Sydney, and this letter came over the committee table at one meeting in about September 1984, and it was from Dick Smith, who was then probably at the height of his sort of publicity, escapism, adventurous part of his life.
Yeah.
And he said, I want to run an event which was like the Redex trials back in the 1950s, and I want it to raise funds, and I'd like to give those funds to Variety. I said, look, I think we should do this. I mean, it's Dick Smith. He's had a great success in the things he's done so far. The business was then still his, although I think he had sold it to Woolworths in the next couple of years. So I persuaded, I suppose, the other members of the Variety Club committee to go ahead. And so that was September 84, and we took off on June the 4th, I think it was, 1985. And then we took off from the Opera House on a dreary, dull Saturday morning, aiming for somewhere in those days no one had really heard of. Burketown? Isn't that where Burke and Wills came to a sticky end? Somewhere around there. And that was it. That was Burketown on the Gulf of Carpentaria.
Millionaires to Battlers, June 1, 1985. Why was it... Were the cars designed to have... They needed to be 20 years old, is that right?
Dick had all these wealthy friends, and most of them came on the early events. And they were quite wealthy. They'd done very well with businesses or being chairman of businesses and so forth. So Dick said, well, look, to level the playing field, everyone's got to have a car that is 20 years old. Oh. So this was 1985. All the cars had to be 1965. So if you go back through the Australian cars, that was E.H. Holden's, H.R. Holden's, Fairlanes, Valiant AP5s, and other such iterations of those cars.
Were you allowed to modify or not?
Theoretically, you could do anything you liked, but there was something called scrutineering, where engineering people who Dick had on hand sort of lifted the bonnet, had a look, and went, "Is that a 5-speed gearbox you got in there, or is that a V8 you've got in this ordinary Morris Minor, or whatever?" So,
would that happen?
It did happen, but the one thing that when we cheated with our Morris Minor, we put a a 5-speed gearbox, a Toyota Celica 5-speed gearbox into a Morris Minor, because Morris Minors came 1, 2, 3, 4 and reverse. We had a 5-speed box.
That was with Peter Werrett?
That was with Peter Werrett. No. Peter was a boy from Ryde, and he had been a motoring journalist. He worked for Shell for a long time, motoring journalist, and then he had this wonderful television program in the early 70s called Torque, as in Torque, and it was all about cars. He wasn't a Clarkson or a May or a Hammond, but he was the first person really to have it was on the ABC, a national program on motoring. And he would test cars, and at the end of the test, he'd lean against the bonnet or lean against the door and give you a rundown on what the car was like. And if he didn't like it, he'd tell you.
Would he be like your navigator? Would you have a navigator?
No, they had me, and I'd never navigated anyway. But there was no way that Peter was going to be a navigator. I mean, he was a very good driver.
Okay.
And he drove most of the way. I mean, I did some of the sort of long-distance stuff from Sydney to Burke or Dubbo, I think it was, Dubbo. And then he took over. He did most of the dirt driving, because I had never driven in the dirt before.
Right.
And so it was much better for him to do the driving.
Now, John, people would do one of these events and get hooked. Do you think it was going to be around as long as it did? Did you get a feeling of that?
It was very exciting at the Opera House. On the Saturday morning, we went up. I mean, Peter was broadcasting from the steps of the Opera House. The car was parked alongside him. It had 2GB sponsorship. And there were people, I mean, you look around, there was John Newcombe. There's Len Evans. There are all these people, and you go, well, there's Val Taylor, the Shark Lady, and Ron Taylor, her husband. Goodness gracious me, this is quite a big event.
Wimbledon winners to John Singleton,
John Newcombe,
to Miss World,
Belinda
1972.
Green, singer was there, and there were lots of other bizoids that I sort of knew of or had recognised from the papers, and you go, wow, this is going to be huge. And there's a lovely man called Brian Huxley who owned a business called Huxley Homes, and he came in late, but he had the car number 20,000. And that's how much he'd raised to enter the event. So straight away, we went, wow, this is going to be good for variety. But how does this happen? And as we travelled, I saw how it happened. People had wads of cash. There weren't any ATMs around. Well, there might have been ATMs. Yes, there were, but they weren't used in the bush.
Is that how you were primarily making the money at that point?
When Dick said, cheats prosper, and the biggest cheat wins, he was absolutely right. You would come in the middle of nowhere, you'd come across an official vehicle, a Land Rover, with a couple of people on board, and they'd stop you at a gate, and they'd stop you and say, you can't come through this gate unless you pay, X amount of dollars. And everyone knew this. So a lot of us had checks made out to the Variety Club and hand over. Is this worth 50? I've got 100 here. Well, take 100, said the greedy official straight away. So you paid the 100. They opened the gate and you went through. The other option was to drive along the fence for about 100 kilometres to find the next, and you had no idea where you were. So it wasn't a time to be saying, I don't need this gate, I'll go to another one. There was no other way.
It was like
so this was where the money came in.
A bit of a treasure hunt, sort of, almost. Why did you choose a Morris Minor?
I'd learned that the BBC was coming to make a documentary on this event. And so as soon as I heard the Ponds were coming, he said referring to the rest of his countrymen, I thought, they won't know what a Ford Falcon is, they won't know what an AP5 Valiant is, but they will know what a Morris Minor is. So that was it. And
were they well-made cars?
They sold 1 million in the first, 20 years, or something like that, 48 to about 50, 60, 12 years they sold 1 million. They were brilliant cars. They went all over the world. And you go to Singapore, you go to Malaysia, you go to KL, you'll still see Morris Minors being driven around there, and they're being restored in England now.
So that's the Mini Minor, right?
No, it's the Morris Minor.
Right.
The Mini came out in August 59 and was tiny, designed by the same man, Alec Izigonis, in 1946, just after the war, came up with a Morris Minor, 2-door, 4-door, utilities, panel vans, all sorts of things. And then in 1959 came up with the Mini Minor, which was even smaller than the Morris Minor. So the Morris Minor was bread and butter to so many people in England.
What was the most interesting vehicle that you think you've ever seen?
There was a guy from the Sutherland Shire, an accountant, who managed to get a lot of money out of his clients. And he had an HR Holden, which was made to look like '88, it was the First Fleet.
Oh, right.
So he had sails which were hinged on the roof, so they went down if he came under a bridge or anything like that. But he had wooden bits on the front and on the back, which looked like the front and the stern of a Captain Cook First Fleet, Arthur Phillip First Fleet. So there was just they did some wonderful things with ordinary cars, but we also had we had a Rolls Royce. In fact, we had a Rolls Royce, a 1939 Rolls Royce, which went all the way to Blatherskite, which is Alice Springs, the showground at Alice Springs. We had a brand new, reconditioned Mark VII Jaguar, a massive car, which was literally British Racing Green and had been totally restored by a very wealthy advertising man. And that looked absolutely beautiful. Didn't look quite so good as it neared Darwin, because it had in fact gone off the course and run into a tree. But the thing is, when we pulled back off the tree, everything was still working, because the front of the radiator was at least about 3 or 4 foot, a metre back in front of the radiator. That's how much space there was. It was so large. So when it hit the tree, it bent the front of the radiator back, but it didn't touch the radiator. And it was able to drive with this huge U in the front of the car. I mean, this is what people did, but they wanted to keep going. They were determined to keep going. And that's something that happened in the Bash. People rolled cars, they went off, they had accidents. No, we've never had a major accident. On the actual event.
Have you not had a major accident?
Yes, we have had deaths in the event.
Right, yeah.
And there was always a reason why they happened.
Yeah, yeah. So the object of the exercise wasn't to go fast?
No, it started with Dick as a drive in the outback. Now, a lot of people hadn't driven in the outback before, and suddenly they were able to go at quite fast speeds, because they weren't going around the town.
Yeah.
So you're in the sort of 100 kilometres from Dubbo to Burke. It's almost a straight line. And in those days, it had a railway line coming the other way. So you could go quite fast.
Yes.
So people did. And then when they were on the dirt, they were gung-ho, and they would go screaming around in the dirt and the dust, having a great time. And sometimes they'd go off the road, they'd drive around, and they'd come back on again, and they keep going fast. So we kept that going, and we did have special stages where you were timed. So you were given a clock, and you were timed in, and you got to the other end, which could be 150, 200 kilometres down the track, and you go along roads, navigation systems weren't existing, so you had pieces of paper with left, right, whatever. So they kept going faster. And then people started bribing us so that they could leave, they could have their time altered, so they left like before they had. So when they arrived at the other end, the officials there said, "Gosh, you've done this very quickly." And they go, "Oh yeah, it was a wonderful time. Thank you very much indeed." And then that would then put them up the winnings on the sheet that night. Everyone go, "Oh, they've done that very well." They hadn't. They'd done it in an ordinary time, but they'd paid to shorten their times. Then it got quite serious, and people were.
So you were being timed.
You were being timed.
Yeah.
Yes, but it got to the stage where people were actually paying money to start at the time they finished. So suddenly people were arriving and saying, "You haven't actually left yet, on this timing." And they were going quite fast. So finally, I said, right, we're going to scrap all the special stages. Everything now is just going to be a drive. Because I could see the dangers. I mean, some of the properties we were going through, with permission, were big potholes, washaways, and we had to put up big stakes in the ground with a big C, or double C, or triple C, depending on the how seriously bad the road ahead was. And it would be on the instructions, triple C for the next 2 kilometres. And some of the roads really were appalling. So we decided to stop all that. And there were no speeds, but people were advised that this was not a good time to be speeding.
You mentioned before that some of the participants are quite affluent. Do you think there's an element of... I think Kerry Packer used to get involved in sporting events like polo and playing with Greg Norman. Because once you've got a certain amount of money, you've there's an element that you want to go and feel something else, feel alive a little bit. Do you think that's plays a little bit of a part in that?
I certainly think it was in those early days, because the people who came on the early bashes, it was certainly 8 days of a drive, and then if they stayed in Broome or the Barrier Reef at the end of the event, had another couple of days there or whatever, and then they might have driven their cars home on the road, you had about a fortnight away from the office, away from home, away from everything. And people couldn't contact you unless they rang at the motel and said, can I leave a message for X to ring me, please?
You had to go to the back of Burke, and that was just to get to the start.
It was an 11-hour drive from the Opera House, and it rained consistently from about Penrith onwards, up through the Blue Mountains, and we came to Narromine. And in the video, the program that the BBC made, there are pictures of some of the drivers getting out of their cars into puddles. And the great thing about that was it hadn't rained in Narromine for months and months. And so
you guys were like rainmakers.
We were rainmakers. In fact, that's what they called him, because they called Dick the rainmaker, because we got to Burke at the end of the first day, 11 hours driving. I mean, in England, you drive more than 10 hours and you've gone from one end of the country to the other. And this was only getting to the start of the outback, let alone what the next 5 days getting up to Mount Isa. I mean, there was a sense of excitement. At the Opera House, there was this wonderful sense, the Model T Ford, for instance, a Model T Ford. So that would be pre-1920s or thereabouts. I can't remember the exact date. But and there were Ford Fairlane 500s, fast and powerful cars, which is what Brian Huxley brought to the event. No one knew what was going to happen. They all had a sense of adventure, and I don't think anyone really had a great understanding of what it was all about being on the road in a 20-year-old car.
Yeah.
When you drive a 20-year-old car now, you know, the air conditioning is not as good as it was, the brakes aren't as good, all the mechanical stuff is not as good as it was.
They're getting an absolute beating, I imagine, and they're older vehicles, so you're really being put through the mill there. There must have been some bizarre breakdowns.
There were, but one of the great things about the event was we decided that we knew this was going to happen. Dick had it was sponsored by Land Rover, so we had a couple of Land Rover 110s and a couple of mechanics who Dick knew who came along to fix the cars. And so we kept these MWs, mobile workshops, because we knew that a lot of people who might have a lot of money didn't necessarily know about driving cars or fixing cars they could drive. Yeah. And they were going into the outback where you could be 100, 150 kilometres from a pub or a property or whatever.
Sure.
So we set up mobile workshops. What we said was, if you have a breakdown, there was always a sweep vehicle at the very back of the fleet. No one left town in the morning until the other official had got to the lunch stop. And they would either call back or phone up and say, we are at the lunch stop. So if people followed the route instructions, they would get to the lunch stop, and they didn't have the afternoon route instructions until everyone was there or it was ready to move on. So we had to put this in to make sure that people just didn't drive off, and if they got lost, we didn't know whether they'd been to lunch, whether they're after lunch or whatever. Yeah. So we had to watch it. You had to watch the
It's
crew.
interesting. So you would have needed to work this out as you went along. You would have had to learn these lessons, right?
And we said, wherever you are, wherever you stop, we will get you to the nearest pub, property, or phone. Because if you get to a pub, you're certainly going to be all right. If you get to a property, the property owners actually rather liked the bash going through because it was great fun for the kids and so forth. And sometimes there were just phones on an airstrip or something like that where we could get people to. And that was it. And we had a lovely mobile workshop man called Fred Crook. And Freddie always said, give me a piece of 4x2 and some fencing wire, and I'll get a car going for 3 days at least. Some cars Freddie and his team put together kept going for the rest of the bash, and when they got to the end destination, the film crews who were with us usually filmed opening the bonnet, and there was the 4x2 and the fencing wire still in place, and the car was still going.
Wow.
Brilliant.
Was there a celebrity one? Is that right?
Oh, well, as we built the event, we got celebrities to come along. Dick Smith was a celebrity.
Yeah, sure.
So he was the biggest celebrity.
John Singleton, John
and
Newcomb.
Singo. Len Evans was a great
Len
character.
Evans.
You saw of him a lot of. Oh, Gordon Elliott. He was there because he was on the Channel 10 Good Morning GMA, Good Morning Australia, and so he came because he was involved with Westfield. So Westfield put a car in with their marketing manager, and so Gordon came on that. He got to be known as Gordon Idiot because he wasn't actually a very good driver, but he was fairly gung-ho. And he was also, at 6 foot, whatever he is, 8, he was a recognisable celebrity throughout Australia because Good Morning Australia was nationwide.
At the start of the race, it's human nature. You can't help but get competitive, right? So it would have been adrenaline pumping, anxiety, mixture of excitement. Is that right?
Yes, it is. You're quite right, because we'd leave town. So the first few years, we started from Burke. We drove to Burke, and then we'd have dinner at the Oxley Club, which is where we went the first night on the first bash. So it was a sort of coming back to the start. And then people would leave from the town outside the post office. We had a big banner right across the street, and they'd drive out of Burke, and they would then they'd go about 16 kilometres out, and they'd turn to the right, and there would be a sign saying Leander. It just said Leander, the property. And they then followed the route instructions, and they would suddenly see the sign saying Leander, but they were going that way. So that's when it started. And once they got off the main road, which was the main road from Burke to Charleville and north, and Cunnamulla, that was it. They could go quite flat out if they wanted to.
Quite flat out if they wanted to.
And some of the videos show that quite graphically of cars going flat out in dirt conditions.
Right.
It was fun.
You wouldn't want it to be too cosy.
There were sections where they could go. They could not go wrong. If it was dry, and they had grids to go over. Some of the grids over the years, instead of being flat and just lowered to stop the cattle going across, the grids were sort of high, and some of the cars, they would literally take off.
Whoa.
And come down on all fours.
Dukes of Hazzard style.
Yeah, it was. You're absolutely right. So that's why we had a helicopter, because we filmed a lot of this on helicopter, because we also used the helicopter to know where people were. And if we could see from the helicopter a trail of dust going to the
trail
left,
of dust.
and then a trail of dust going, a smaller trail of dust going off to the right, we went, hang on. Written instructions say turn right. So the guy on the right is correct. The guy on the left, so we'd then spear off, find the car, and go, hello, this is the chopper speaking. It's Mr. Flower here. Oh, hello, Mr. Flower.
Would you be in the chopper?
I'd be in the chopper. Yeah. Well, I didn't want to be in all that dust.
Nah.
I'd done it before.
Some people would get their vehicle moved down a rung and go in the chopper. Is that right?
Oh, you could pay if you wanted to go in a chopper. You paid money straight away. I mean, we paid, the variety paid for the chopper, and the chopper pilot was a guy called Terry Lee, and I worked with him at Channel 7. He did a lot of commercials. He did a lot of films in the 80s. Crocodile Dundee would be one of them he'd be known for, and he was just a brilliant chopper pilot, and a lovely guy. He's still around today, but. We would go and find the people and get them back into the track, and then in the evening we'd advertise, we'd out on stage doing all the stuff. Do you want to go for a ride in the chopper? And then people would bid for it.
Oh, they'd bid for it.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. While we're on that, you could get pole position. How could you get pole position?
Well, in the first year, Singo, naturally, a lot of money. I think he paid $10,000, a cheque for $10,000 from whoever it was, gave it to Dick, and Dick said, right, everybody, Singo, it's got first.
And it just sort of came out of that.
Until the morning, when Singo started to drive down the line, and Dick said, no, sorry, someone's paid $12,000, you're out. And he's paid another $1,000 for you to go to the back. So Singo had to go all the way to the back.
Wow.
These things were just some of the funniest things. It's like,
would it be better to get pole position?
Well, it would, because if you get ahead, you don't have any dust. You're not in someone else's dust. Yeah. And some of the times when it's late afternoon, and I was in the four-wheel drive, Bash 1 number plate, with my team, and we would be catching up all the time, the cars that were ahead, and we'd always try to get past, because you literally were in blinding dust.
Yeah.
And it's not particularly pleasant.
Eat my dust.
But
Is this bull dust? It's a particular type of dust.
Are you talking about what I'm saying?
Is that right? It's easy to get bogged in it. And,
yeah. It's bull dust, and when it's dry, and when it's wet, it's absolute nightmare and quagmire.
Right.
And we've had, I think some of the deep shit moments. I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
We were at Lightning Ridge. The rain was coming, but we thought we could get out of Lightning Ridge to Brewarrina and then on to Burke for the finish. This is for that night. We were doing a loop, and we were going to go back to Bathurst that that year. And so I said to everyone, okay, get out of Lightning Ridge, get on the road and go, because we think the rain is coming down.
Right.
What we didn't know was that about 20 kilometres out of Lightning Ridge, the rain had already come down, and it had caused a massive, it would be about 110 kilometres of absolutely vehicle-sucking mud.
Oh, right.
And so we started going in.
Vehicle sucking, what do you mean?
Vehicle suck. It just literally, you get into the mud, and you just slowly sink into the mud.
Yeah, right.
And you stop, you don't get, it's not quicksand,
Sure.
but you cannot get out. And the more you spin, the more your tyres just get clogged. And then it's hard then for the four-wheel drives to come up and pull you out. We flew out from Lightning Ridge over the top of this road, and I could see people sliding along. I could see our crews, the mobile workshops, pulling people out. And I thought, this is a nightmare. We'd left Lightning Ridge about 2:00. The last car came into Brewarrina, and I was waiting for them at 3 a.m. in the morning. It had taken them 12 hours to do about 100 kilometres.
Right, yeah. So there would have been events like that which really test you out.
But we had to know where the officials were, how the pack was travelling. So we had HF radio for us, we had a helicopter, we had mobile workshops, and we had about sometimes 15 official vehicles. And they were moving with the pack all the time. And that's what the Variety Club Bash set up almost from day one. I think that's what made the Bash so good, was that we looked after everyone who came on board. The cars had to be scrutineered. We used to go to Tony Packard Holden up the Windsor Road.
Scrutineered, what do you mean? Yeah, so
literally, they drive in, they go up on a hoist. We had a chief scrutineer who was a racing driver and a lovely guy, and he knew enough about engineering and mechanics to know that you had to have chains holding the engine back. You had to have all sorts of things that you wouldn't have on a normal car, but these were ordinary cars going into extraordinary terrain, and you wouldn't have ordinary nuts and bolts. They had to be really sort of stronger, better shock absorbers. Yeah. Sometimes they ended up coming through the back window ledge that they used to have in cars, in the older cars, because there was so much going up and down on the shock absorbers, they would literally punch through, and therefore they became useless. So that's what the Variety Club Bash set up, was a safety net.
Any hair-raising emergency situations where you did have to go and get people stranded in the middle of nowhere?
We had rollovers, but again, we had official vehicles. We even had going to Broome in 1989. We had 2 doctors and 2 ambulances travelling. The whole point of the exercise was that if there was an emergency, this safety net, the helicopter could be sent there. We also had 2 planes.
Did you?
But obviously they weren't good. But they could go down, have a look at what was going, circle off, and then keep going to. Yeah. Or they could also radio back.
Cessna type thing.
Cessnas, usually 182 or something like that. Yeah. They were great.
What's it like? Because you can sign an anonymous check, when you're signing checks, and just donate anonymously to causes. What's it like when you're actually going through the community that you're supporting? What's that like?
What do you think of while you're driving all those hours? Down with straight roads and everything. We just think of the children.
That was the best part of the whole event, was we would go to town, and this is what we'd do in the surveys. We would set up, we'd find the school, the hospital, whatever it might be. We'd come into town and say, we are the Variety Club, we are bringing the Bash, and sometimes we would arrive at a town with a population of 185 people, and the Bash was carrying 355 people. Can you feed us? Can you give us dinner and breakfast? So that was one of the things. We knew how much money we would put in for, if it was an overnight stop, it was dinner overnight. There was a bar in the hotel, which you wouldn't want. You need lots of people to count the takings that night.
Right.
Then there was breakfast the next morning. Then there was the fuel that 208 cars would need, the fuel that the helicopter would need out at the airport.
Yeah, so on that, people talk about, impact, economical impact because of events like that. You can measure it, can you?
You can quantify it, because literally we would know how much each meal cost, how much we were going to put into the town. So most meals, for instance, even 40 years ago, an evening dinner would be $20. Lunch would probably be $10.
What was the food like? I imagine people would have a certain quality that would need to be met, right?
They might have, but it probably didn't help them with the food.
Dom Perignon in the paddock, sort of thing.
Yeah, right. That's you're thinking along the right line. One of the good things we knew was that there were a number of organisations. The Country Women's Association has been running for over 100 years with country women, and these come off properties, big properties where it's a 2-hour drive just to get to the town.
Yes.
They've also got great recipes. They provide wonderful sandwiches for lunches. There's always a lammo, a plate of lamingtons. There's cakes. There's sponges. There's everything.
Yeah.
So they were very good. The isolated.
So they were catering.
Oh, they would come and cater. So we'd go to the village hall.
Oh, it would have been good.
Oh, and the locals just loved it because there were 200 cars parked along the main road.
Yeah.
And there was a village hall, in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And there was this crowd of people just eating and having a wonderful time, taking kids for rides. And at the end of it, if it was a small village, on the surveys we'd have found who wanted the money, and we would take, for instance, a playground equipment and put it into the school. Or we'd arrange for it to come. Swings, roundabouts, all that sort of thing. In the early days, it was very simple. How many books would you like? Would you like a VHS, a VCR recorder, so that kids can watch videotapes? All those things.
The first one, John, was that for orphanages?
The funny thing is, the Variety Club was formed in America in 1928 because a small child was found in an orphanage, and no one knew who the child was, except there was a note from the mother saying, I've got 8 other children, I can't look after this one, my husband's out of work, please can you look after? And the people from a club who were all involved with showbiz in Pittsburgh in that time, they started this thing called the Variety Club. They officially adopted the girl, Catherine Variety Sheridan, named after the theatre where the baby had been found. And she came out to Australia, I think, 1988. She's gone now. But that's how the Variety Club started. A child, orphanages, a child who'd been abandoned. And so the Variety Club people, back in the 20s, wanted to help children of all needs. Mm-hmm. And that's what it started off by being handicapped or underprivileged children. By the time I finished in 1998, the Variety Club, people were asking the Variety Club Bash to come to our town if they knew where we were going, starting from Sydney and going somewhere, whether we were going through to Queensland or wherever. Can you come and have lunch at our town? And if it fitted in, we said, yes, Gundawindi, we'll be there.
Oh, can you come to our town? Yeah, okay, they'd actually want it. Is it still going?
Since 1975, which was when the Variety Club first came to Australia, so we've just had our 50th anniversary of Variety, that's raised more than $700 million, and it's helped more than 2 million kids and their families. Wow. So 2 million, that's a lot of kids.
Just from a bloke of guys of mates going on a junket.
Well, this is it. I mean, this is the interesting thing about the Bash was in 1984, Variety had raised in Sydney, New South Wales, $450,000. Now that came about with lots of lunches. I mean, years ago we used to go to a big hotel on Melbourne Cup Day or this day or that day and have lunches, and people would come along. There'd be an auction. And you'd raise funds and so forth that way. And it took a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of personnel to organise those various functions. And suddenly, in 1985, one event raises $250,000. Is it any wonder that at the end of the first Bash, Dick was going on to look after Australian Geographic, which he'd founded a couple of years before, and that was his next project.
That was his next
and
project.
And also finishing off the helicopter around the world solo. So he was doing that.
What struck you about Dick Smith, working with him?
Fascinating. He's an interesting
mind.
Yeah. And the mind works at 100 miles an hour. And he's always, in those days, he was always thinking of things to do, ways of helping charities. doing things himself. I'm surprised he never went for Parliament, because I think he would have been a shoo-in. But not everyone wants to be in Parliament, and they see that they can do more by being outside Parliament and running things like the Bash or whatever it might be, being involved in charity.
Got things done, didn't he? He got things done.
So that's it. The classic example is when he was on the first year, 1985, it rained all the way to Burke, and we arrived at the Oxley Club, and Dick was nowhere to be seen. Where's Dick? Where's Dick? Oh, he's out the back office fixing up things. Turned out that not only had it rained all the way from Penrith to Burke, it had belted down between...
This was in 85?
85.
Yeah.
Burke to Cunnamulla to Thargomindah, I think, was the next stop.
Most rain in 2 decades, I heard, or something.
Something like that.
Yeah.
It was that's why he's known as a rainmaker. So he spent about 2 hours on the phone ringing small country towns saying... No one had heard of the Bash. They might have seen a bit of television because it was on the ABC News that we'd left the Opera House that morning, but that doesn't guarantee people are going to know about it. And so we had to go to Cunnamulla, and I think it might have been
playing a bit of Slim Dusty.
Absolutely.
I mean, you're in hostile, isolated areas, right? So do you give people, the crews, a bit of a first aid? Bit of a briefing on first aid, mechanics, that sort of thing? Survival?
Yes. Well, we had briefing nights, and in each month for the couple of months before the event, we would meet at a club or an RSL somewhere, have a room, and talk to those people who were coming. And we would tell them that you've got to attend scrutineering, this is how you want your money, do you want to buy T-shirts, caps, merchandise, and so forth.
You've got to attend scrutineering. That was that was an event in itself.
It was 2 days before if we were leaving on the following week, the week before was scrutineering. Yeah. And so people came in, they got all the ticks right, fine, thank you very much indeed, go off and enjoy yourself. Yeah. If you had something wrong somewhere, or the scrutineers didn't think that this or that was going to work and your springs looked a bit dodgy, go and get them fixed. You had to report back the night before the start to make sure that was double-checked.
So originally Dick Smith runs it, and then the Variety Club. What's that transition? Was there a little... Yeah, what's that like?
It was obvious that everyone wanted to go again.
Right.
And so Dick said, I won't be doing it.
I won't be doing it.
No, he wasn't going to do it because he had other things that he wanted to do. And this was Dick at that time. He had a lot of things that he was doing.
Sure.
And so Tony Hasham said, well, John, would you and Peter like to take it on? Peter knows motoring. I sort of... I had a journalistic background. I'm not quite sure why I was picked. Yeah. Anyway, but they must have been able to see that I was the man for the job.
Right.
No, I mean, seriously...
You were enjoying it, right?
We'd enjoyed it, and we'd got some publicity for the car and for the Variety Club on the BBC documentary. So and Peter was a well-known figure, and we decided we would work together to do it. Okay. And it was done with the blessing of Dick Smith, and the Variety Club obviously has never looked back since. Okay. And I could survive about 12 years, and then I decided it was getting a bit much. Yeah. You're travelling over 12 days with 203 vehicles. And 850 people.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people, and you're moving all the time. Now, you can't. We stopped for one day overnight in Mount Isa. We had a spare day in Mount Isa, and that allowed a lot of the people to leave to go home and be replaced by other people.
A logistics nightmare, really. Yeah, huh?
They are somewhat.
I mean, putting it on once is enough, but yes. 12 in a row.
Well, this is when we discovered that Dick's problems with the first night in Burke, getting out the next day. When we came back the next year, we were going from Burke to Charleville, and the very same roads that Dick couldn't get through, we couldn't get through. We had to go to Cunnamulla and out and back. This is when we first learnt. This was year number 1 for us, that you really had to have your druthers about you. And you had to know what was going on, and you had to be on top of it. You couldn't go,
You mean you've gone out along the roads beforehand?
Absolutely. Yeah. All the surveys, all the checking, and you had to know local knowledge. I mean, obviously the police had lots of local knowledge, and in those places they drive 200 kilometres to get to a homestead if there's a report that there's a problem or whatever. So they know a large part of the country around. and they know where they intersect with the next town, Charleville, whatever it might be. So you have to have all those ready to go.
But do you think part of the adventure and part of the spirit is not knowing things? Do you know what I mean? Like, it just seems to me over time, once you've ironed everything out, it sort of, for me personally, it loses a bit of that spontaneity or something.
So the entrance always started off, this is going to be fun. Those that were coming back for the second or third or fourth time know what's happening. They've probably beat now.
Okay.
There are people who've done about 30 bashes over
They
40
really
years.
get the...
They know where they're going, they know what they're doing. They've got huge numbers of mates that are travelling with them. It really is a drive in the outback with a few mates. But it no longer has the wonderful sense of adventure because you've got satellites, you've got sat-nav, you've got Starlink.
So you do lose a bit with all that.
You've lost, to me, and this is not a criticism.
No.
It's a fact of life.
Yeah.
There is more bitumen than there ever was in 1985.
Yes.
There are mobile phones. There are faxes that you can do, or there were faxes then, but you can do all sorts of things with communications now.
Domestication of the roads, of the nation's roads.
And that's it. So it's no longer going out into the outback because probably you've been along this road we came here in 1995. We did this in 19...
Do you run out of places with a destination B?
No, we haven't yet.
What do they do though then?
Well,
Canamble to Coonabarra?
Go move to C and then
B.
So Newcastle is now the New South Wales Bash, and the B2B Bash is the prime event, if you like.
Is it? Yeah.
Because everyone talks about Dick Smith's Burke to Burketown Bash.
Do they?
So you can add to that, it's still called the B2B Bash, and that's the big one.
That's the big one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the other states have as you say, Ceduna to, I don't know, Cocklebitty or something like that.
What was your favourite track?
I think the favourite track was to Broome, because it went from Bondi.
I remember that one. It has something about that.
Well,
that's one I remember, the Broome one.
We had Farnham and Wheatley.
Farnham,
John and Jill Farnham, Glenn and Gaynor Wheatley, Trevor Hendy. We had Ironmen, we had Brock, we had Dick Johnston.
Did Farnham was he involved in the race?
Farnham, there were Channel 7.
What a voice. The voice.
He was.
What about the world around us?
That came out in 88, 87, 88. And in 89, it was still massive. And John was one of the best celebrities we could have with us. He was... nothing was too much trouble. He was driving in the outback and the helicopter was above him, so he's waving out of the car and so forth. And as he went past, a gate, a big iron gate, to a property. You couldn't see the property. It was about 5 kilometres down the track. Yeah. But there were some kids and a family there. John screamed to a halt, turned round, got out of the car and went and sat and just talked to the kids. You can imagine the squeals.
Yeah.
I mean, you could almost hear them from a helicopter. That's what he did, and he did that almost every day. We got to the Mount Isa, and we had an overnight there and then another day. He sat down in the Mount Isa Civic Centre, which I think was licensed to hold 100 people. There were 300 people there, and John sat down at the grand piano and played Help with 2 hands, because that's the only thing he can play on the piano. The rest of it, he can't play any instrument, but he can certainly play Help on the piano. And it just brought the house down. And everyone paid money to listen to it. He was just brilliant. So the celebrities, there have been many. But as the profile of Broome going across...
had something about it, the Broome.
It was brilliant. It was also the time when Broome had just, Lord McAlpine had just built the Cable Beach Club. Broome was suddenly being lifted from a slightly dying pearling town.
Yes.
Suddenly it came
Money
up.
was coming in.
Money was coming in, and it was brilliant. And I learnt about Australia all over, literally. And in fact, Ian McNamara from the ABC's Australia All Over came with us on many occasions. So I think what I took away from it was the sense of adventure in the outback, driving, and I'm not a brilliant driver by any means, but I enjoy it. And that to me was what the outback drive should be. It should be a drive in the outback with a few mates. Mm-hmm.
once the event's finished and the drive home, has it got a totally different vibe to it?
And it's part of what it's all about. It's also, as you say, there's no pressure on you then.
Yeah.
You are just driving.
Yeah.
And you can get to a town and you don't have to worry about 500 people. You just go to a motel and say, you got a bed for the night, love?
Who do you think was the quintessential basher? Is that what they're called, bashers?
Yeah, oh yes, they are. The quintessential basher, I think it's someone who has a group of mates, is a convivial person. He has the ability to raise funds, be it in his local community, through his office, if he runs a company, every division puts in something or whatever. It's money for kids. He wants to have an interest in helping special children with special needs. Yeah. He needs to know that that's where his money is going. And he likes driving in the outback.
So just a little bit more on the cheating. Why was it encouraged? Raise more money.
It was Dick's way of saying, you can have anything you want, providing you pay money for it. And he knew that a lot of those people... Kevin Weldon was one of the great publishers, and he published the Macquarie Dictionary. He's a massive publisher, very wealthy, done well. And Dick knew him because obviously Dick was into publishing as well. So there were people like that who may not have been, some who were well known, other people were not so well known, but Dick knew them as the owner of a big engineering company or something like that, which didn't have a high profile. Sure. But he knew that Joe Blow ran Your Name Engineering.
Yeah.
And he knew he was worth a fortune, so he wanted to prize it out of him.
Yeah, right.
So that was what it was all about. And people took it so well. I mean, they loved it.
Took it so
absolutely
well.
Brilliant. Because if they did something they shouldn't have done, they would straight away say, oh, this is going to cost me money, isn't it? Yes.
Who was the best cheat?
Oh, Singo was wonderful. I think it comes second nature. No, not true.
Because the best cheat wins, right?
Well, no, because the best cheat might actually spend his last 10,000 saying, I want to be a winner, and then someone comes in with, here's 10,000 or two, thank you much, or 3 or 4 or 5. Yeah. So it was part
Did he
of
roll
fun.
once? Did I see that?
He did. On the first event, he was with his then wife, Belinda Green, former Miss World, and they were in a very nice Mercedes 220 SE, and has never one to miss an opportunity. So they had John and Belinda, and they had a mechanic and a friend who was actually driving, and he was driving into the sun. And he just went off the road.
Bit of
and
dust
rolled.
and sun.
It's a very solid car. Singo gets out, the cameras arrive, Singo's standing there, and he said, I don't know what happened. I was sitting in the back reading Rugby League Week. And guess what his advertising company did? They were the publicity people for Rugby League Week. he could not miss it.
Yeah.
So look, there were some wonderful people. Newcombe was not alone in saying, I'm not quite sure where we are today, because they'd never been there before.
What happens if you take things too seriously? You weren't having enough fun.
You get fined. Because it's in the rule book from day one. The rule book that we got... Well,
Is that still happens now?
Sorry. Oh, yes. It was one of those things... I mean, I haven't seen a brochure on the bash for a while, but I know that the first one that Dick put out for 1985 had somewhere in it, taking it seriously is going to cost you money. Yeah. So I said, if you take it too seriously, you will be fined, depending on the seriousness of the seriously. Or the seriousness of how seriously you take it. So it was always made as light. I tried to put as much humour into the rules and regulations, except when there was some serious stuff. And you didn't want people coming with cars that were no good. Because that was dangerous.
There was a business side of it.
Yes, there was a business side. We wanted everyone to drive and have fun.
In order to be safe, you've got to have some hard rules, yeah?
And they are all outlined in the brochure that people get when they sign up to be involved with the Variety Club. And it's for the bash. Bring along a car. It might not be fully secured when it gets to scrutineering, but by the time the engineers have been over it, the mechanics have been over it, they will tell you, based on plenty of bashes, what is likely to go wrong with this particular make of car, and go away, fix it, and come back. Once you've got it right, then you can go. And they then know, the scrutineers, and who are also come on the bash, they will know that they've done their best to make sure that all the cars on the event are going to be roadworthy,
Yeah.
not necessarily in a sort of legalistic way. I mean, they have to be legal to drive
Yes.
to get rego, but that's
What was the most common thing that you would need to be bolstered?
suspension,
Yes.
sumps. Because
Sumps.
you go up and you come crashing down on a rock or something, and then suddenly you hear this.
What would you do
clattering
with a
sound.
sump? Put a cage around it?
Oh,
What would you do?
You had to put extra plates.
Extra
you had to put
plates.
extra plates or plating, thicker plating
Thicker
underneath the sump. So the sump is attached to the engine, but underneath that you would have attached fore and aft or side by side another section of plating. So the first thing to hit the ground was not the sump, but
Interesting.
the metal.
So mainly suspension, mainly that.
Suspension,
Mucking around with compounds of tyres and things, or that's getting too much?
tyres, basically, yes, you have good tyres. I mean, we had some vehicles that had massive tyres on them.
What do you think the best vehicle is for it?
Certainly not a Morris Minor.
Was that not a good choice?
Oh no, it was a lovely choice, except that we cheated and we put a 5-speed Toyota Celica gearbox. And the one thing that went wrong was a plug in the 5-speed Toyota Celica gearbox. And we were at Windora, which is about 250 kilometres from Birdsville. So just think about Birdsville, just move slightly east, and that's where our car stopped. We stopped, we opened the doors, and about 2 tons of fine red dust just came pouring out.
Yeah.
We'd had to tie the doors shut and make sure everything was right. We'd had to leave the quarter vents as they have them, and dust had just come straight in.
So which vehicle would you pick?
Oh, I think now I'd go in a 1965 Mercedes 220.
Would you? Well, they just made them so well, didn't they?
They were made well, and if you buy, I've always said, if you're going to buy a second-hand car, buy the top-of-the-range second-hand car.
Top-of-the-range one,
It'll be second-hand,
Yes.
but it'll have all the bits and pieces. And that's...
What was that model? 65.
It's about a 65. It's known as a finny because they had fins on the back.
Oh, yeah.
And they fitted in to the proviso.
65. You're going back there. That's 40. That's 80-year-old car, isn't it?
Along with
Pretty
that,
much. Well, hang on. What are we? 26? No, 60-year-old.
35,
But you only need to be 30 or 20.
Oh, no, now it's gone up to about... It went from...
It's gone up.
Well, it had to. I mean, because 1985, it was 20 years. So
Yes.
that was 1965. And I said, Peter and I sat down and went, if you continue, you're going to get valiant Pacers and some really fast cars,
Right.
which are production cars, say, in 1970, 71.
Yes.
They were Monaros.
Yes.
They were getting fast cars.
Muscle
And
cars.
muscle cars. So I think they stopped for a long time at mid-70s. And now it's... So, I mean, 25 yards, you can get 2 cars from 2000, theoretically, on that basis. So I think they've stopped it somewhere in the 80s or 90s.
Oh, did they?
I can't say that because I haven't actually looked at what they're
interesting.
doing now.
They actually stopped that.
But it was to stop them having fast cars.
You're dealing with vehicles, distance travel. There's an element of risk, right?
When you've got 208 cars, 500 people travelling for 12 days in the outback, not all of them are expert drivers, and that's why we don't have any competitive stages. It's just a drive in the outback. But yes, you have to be aware that you're not the only people on the road. Sometimes you are lying astern of about 30 cars. The dust is enormous, and someone coming up behind you can't see ahead of you, whatever. You have
Right.
people. This is what happened with John Farnham. The car ahead, the Iron Men, had stopped at a gate, and Farnham didn't see it, and so they went straight up the back.
Oh.
So the two Peugeots, they were fixed, but then they carried on. But yes, so it's like anything.
But something like that could have been quite tragic, right?
Motorsport is dangerous. I mean, This is the first thing that you used to say on the tickets you get to any motor racing meeting. Motorsport is dangerous. So this is motors, and it's a fun event. Certainly, given the fact that we have had several hundred cars and several thousand people, I think we've had a remarkably clean record.
And it was deliberately not competitive.
It's not a competitive event. I mean, the cheating, yes, you can still cheat,
Yeah.
and you can still pay money and get someone put to the back of the start line or whatever. But there's no cheating in terms of I want to go fast and here's some money so I can go really fast.
Why do you think it's been such a successful fundraiser?
I think the fact that it's still a week away or 10 days away, so you still have the excitement of going out with the mates, and some of these people have been doing it for a long time. They've got a whole crowd of people that come from the same village or the same suburb in Sydney or wherever it might be, or down in Wollongong.
Yes.
So they all know, and they like being involved, and they want to keep being involved. So I think from that point of view, that's one of the reasons why it continues, and because those people, especially the new people, suddenly get taken to lunch in a small village, and then they go to a school, and they see maybe a child in a wheelchair, a child who is seriously autistic, and the teachers are looking after them the best they can. It's a remote village, remote town, whatever it might be, and suddenly the Variety Club is putting money into the school and equipment, whatever it might be, a special wheelchair, a sunshine coach, which are coaches like Toyota 15-seaters, which take children out into the sunshine. That's where the name came from. And we've given hundreds of those away.
Hundreds of those.
Over the years.
John, so from guys on a road trip, mates, basically on a caravan or a junket, 250,000 raised in 1985. What are we talking about now over 4 decades?
Since that first event in 1985, the bash, overall, all the bashes that have ever been held, have raised 260 million. 260. So you've gone from 250,000 to 260
million. Wow.
In 40 years.
That they would never have had. If What's that gone into?
Oh, well, sunshine coaches, lots of schools, lots of initiatives for helping variety kids.
What's a variety kid? Someone who's disadvantaged?
Well, someone whose family or school knows that this child has special needs, and they go...
Intellectually or financially?
Intellectually, financially, the family may not be able to buy a wheelchair or afford something necessary for that child. Since Variety started, that was back in Australia, 1975, they have helped more than 2 million children
2 million.
And families.
Yeah. Do you think your core skill was that experience in the logistics of that?
I think it's the planning. It's all in the planning, because then it's all in the planning. Well, it's all in the mind, isn't it?
The years that you were really well planned, and I'm sure it might have been every one of them, it just ran smoothly, did it?
Apart from that, when we got rain and vehicles got bogged.
Yes.
But in terms of everything was in place. So if we did get 50 vehicles bogged, we had the wherewithal and the resources to get them back on track.
So you would be planning, and then you need to communicate that plan. Would that be right?
Yes. Yeah. And you have to get it out to the town. I mean, there's a lot of, this is in the days of faxes. You had to send out faxes or letters. We used to write letters to councils and post them after we'd done the survey, saying we'd like to use this road and that road, and is this going to be possible? I'd done journalism, and I'd done public relations, and I'd done television production. As a reporter and a producer. So that was the skill set that I brought to the bash. So the media was always something I could handle to get publicity and so forth.
Yes, okay.
So that was...
How important is publicity?
Vital. It's always vital. I mean,
why is that? You've got to be known.
You've got to be known that we're coming to town. So there's no point in the publicity in Burke, Hungerford, Wenaring, Tibooburra, Cooper's Creek, Cameron's Corner, not a lot there. But when you go to a town that's got a television station or a radio station, straight in there, talk about the Variety Club.
Is that right?
Oh, yes. It was very important that we got publicity. I mean, we'd send out press releases, media releases to local newspapers.
Would you have a celebrity every year? It helps if John Farnham's in a Peugeot behind you.
Yeah,
That would help you a lot.
Exactly. But we didn't always know, and sometimes we knew that they were coming, but we couldn't say anything. John was very good at all times. And there's a lovely, one of the videos that was made actually has John near McKinley, which is where Crocodile Dundee was shot, but it's also where Banjo Patterson wrote at Dagworth Station, Waltzing Matilda. Oh, so John and the team went off the road to a creek, and I think he stood knee deep in the water and sang Waltzing Matilda,
All right.
echoing around.
John Flower, thank you very much for coming on to Another World today.
Chris, it's been a delight to relive some of the greatest adventures I've ever had in my 80 years. Let me tell you, 12 years with the Bash was just the best.
If you enjoyed this episode, you might enjoy one of these. Please like, share and subscribe. Thank you very much.